Jake Miller walked through the Red Canyon near his family ranch in Arizona. The summer sun was hot on his back as he climbed over rocks and jumped across small streams. He liked exploring these wild places where no one else ever came. His parents thought he was just hiking, but Jake was looking for something special. The 16-year-old boy had found old Native American pottery pieces in these canyons before. Today felt different though. Something was calling to him deeper into the rocky maze. Jake followed a narrow path between two tall stone walls. The air felt cooler here and smelled like metal. After an hour of walking, Jake saw something that made him stop and stare. Half buried in the red sandstone was what looked like a giant metal egg. The surface was smooth and seemed to change colors as he watched. Blue shifted to silver, then to gold, and back again. This was not like any rock or metal Jake had ever seen. Jake climbed down to get a closer look. The object was bigger than his dad's pickup truck. One end was cracked open like something had broken out from inside. Through the crack, Jake could see a soft blue light glowing. His heart beat fast with excitement and fear. He squeezed through the crack in the hull. Inside was like stepping into another world. The walls curved smoothly and glowed with that same blue light. Strange symbols covered every surface. When Jake looked at them directly, they seemed to move and hurt his eyes. Two glass containers sat in the center of the space. Each one was filled with clear liquid, and inside each container was a living being. Jake had never seen anything like them. One looked almost human, but with long pointed ears and beautiful features. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and her hair was silver white. She wore a uniform with strange markings. The other being was clearly not human. She had green-scaled skin and 4 arms. Her head was longer than a human head, with large yellow eyes that were closed in sleep. Sharp teeth showed behind her lips. She also wore a uniform, but it was different from the first being's clothes. Both beings looked like they were sleeping, or maybe dead. Tubes connected to their bodies and machines hummed quietly around them. Jake realized these were not just containers, but some kind of life support systems, keeping these beings alive. On the far wall, Jake saw something that made him forget about everything else. A suit of armor hung there waiting. It was not like medieval armor from history books. This armor seemed alive. It was black as space, but with lines of blue light running through it like veins. The helmet was smooth and featureless, except for a dark visor where eyes would be. Jake walked toward the armor like he was in a dream. He could not stop himself even though part of his mind was screaming that this was dangerous. When he got close to the armor, a panel lit up on the wall beside it. Symbols appeared on the panel and somehow Jake understood what they meant, even though he had never seen this language before. The panel said, "Genetic scan complete. Terran warrior identified, armor activation authorized." Without thinking, Jake pressed his hand against the glowing panel. The moment his skin touched the surface, everything changed. The armor came alive with brilliant light. It flowed like liquid metal off the wall and surrounded Jake faster than he could react. The armor wrapped around his body like a second skin. Jake tried to scream, but no sound came out. The helmet formed around his head, and suddenly he could see everything with perfect clarity. Information flowed into his mind in languages he did not know but somehow understood. Star maps showed in his vision, along with weapon designs and battle tactics from wars fought among distant suns. The armor felt warm and comfortable, like it had been made just for him. When Jake moved his arm, the armor moved with him perfectly. He felt stronger and faster than ever before. His senses were enhanced beyond anything human. He could hear the heartbeats of the two sleeping beings. He could smell the metal and electricity of the ship's systems. Most surprising of all, a voice spoke inside his head. It sounded like his own voice, but older and wiser. The voice said, "Welcome back, Terran warrior. You have been asleep for 1,000 years, but now the armor of your people calls you to battle once more." Jake tried to ask questions, but the voice continued. Your species once ruled the stars as the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known. This armor contains the knowledge and power of all human soldiers who came before you. You are the first to wake up in 10 centuries. The galaxy has forgotten. Humanity exists, but that is about to change. Images flashed in Jake's mind, showing humans in armor, like his fighting across alien worlds. Massive space battles where human ships defeated enemies 10 times their size. Alien species bowing before human commanders and begging for mercy or protection. Jake saw that humans had not always been stuck on Earth. Once they had been the most feared race in the galaxy. The voice explained that humans had chosen to leave the stars and return to Earth. They had become too powerful, and other species feared them too much. So, humanity went into hiding and let the galaxy forget they existed. But they left safeguards behind. The armor was one of those safeguards waiting for the day when humans would be needed again. Jake realized that day had come. The 2 beings in the containers were proof that the galaxy was still full of conflict and war. Somehow their ship had crashed on Earth, and now Jake had awakened the armor that would announce humanity's return to the stars. The armor began teaching Jake how to use its systems. He learned to activate energy shields and enhance his strength. The helmet showed him how to analyze threats and plan attacks. Most importantly, the armor was connected to other suits hidden around Earth. When Jake activated his suit, he had sent a signal to every other Terran combat armor on the planet. Somewhere else on Earth, other humans were waking up to find their own armor calling to them. The age of human isolation was ending. Jake Miller, a 16-year-old boy from Arizona, had just become the first human warrior to return to active duty in 1,000 years. As Jake stood in the alien ship wearing armor that contained the military might of his entire species, he knew his life would never be the same. The galaxy was about to remember why they had once feared the name Terra, and why humans had earned their reputation as the greatest warriors among the stars. The first container began to drain its liquid with a soft hissing sound. Jake stepped back as the glass panel slid open and the pale being inside took her first breath in what might have been years. Her silver eyes opened slowly and focused on Jake. When she saw the armor he was wearing, her face went white with terror. The being spoke in a musical language that Jake did not recognize, but somehow the armor translated her words directly into his mind. She was saying, "No, no, no, this cannot be happening. The Terrans are extinct. The armor should be dead and buried with them." Jake tried to speak, but the armor changed his voice, making it deeper and more commanding. He said, "I am Jake Miller. I found you crashed in this canyon. Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The female being stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. She said in her musical language, "My name is Commander Lyra Silvermoon of the Elvish Stellar Confederation. Young human, you do not understand what you have awakened. That armor you wear has been the subject of nightmares across the galaxy for 1,000 years." Lyra slowly climbed out of her container, moving like someone who had been asleep for a very long time. Her uniform was torn and stained with green blood. She looked around the crashed ship with sadness in her ancient eyes. She continued speaking, and Jake listened through his armor translation system. "We were fleeing the Zephyrian Empire when our ship was damaged in battle. My prisoner and I have been in emergency stasis while the ship searched for a safe world to land on. I never imagined it would bring us to Terra, the Forbidden World." Jake looked at the second container where the scaled being was still unconscious. He asked, "Who is your prisoner, and why were you running from an empire?" Lyra followed his gaze, and her expression hardened. "That is Captain Zara Nethys of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. She commanded a battle cruiser that destroyed 3 of my worlds before I captured her. The Zephyrians have been conquering everything in their path for 50 years. My people have been fighting them, but we are losing badly." The second container began to drain, and Captain Zara started to wake up. Her yellow eyes opened and immediately found Jake in his armor. Unlike Lyra, her reaction was not fear, but recognition. She spoke in a harsh guttural language that the armor also translated. "Well, well," she said, "what do we have here? A human child playing dress-up in the legendary Terran combat armor. I thought your species had destroyed itself in civil war centuries ago." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but the armor helped him stay calm. He said, "I am not playing dress-up. This armor chose me and I am learning to use it. I do not know about any civil war, but I am still human, and humans are still alive on Earth, Captain." Zara laughed as she climbed out of her container. Her forearms moved independently as she stretched muscles that had been still for too long. She said, "Child, you have no idea what you have done. That armor you wear was designed to make human soldiers into unstoppable killing machines. Your species used them to conquer half the galaxy before they vanished." Lyra moved to stand between Jake and Zara, even though she was clearly still weak. She said, "Zara, you will not harm this boy. He may be human, but he is just a child who found something he does not understand." Zara looked amused by Lyra's protective gesture. She said, "Calm yourself, elf. I have no intention of harming the boy. In fact, he may be the most important discovery in 1,000 years. Do you not realize what this means? The Terrans are not extinct. They have been hiding on their homeworld all this time." Jake interrupted both of them, saying, "I do not understand what you are talking about. Humans never left Earth. We have always been here. Some of our stories talk about visiting other planets, but those are just science fiction." Both alien women stared at him in shock. Lyra spoke first, saying, "Young Jake, your people did not just visit other planets. They ruled an empire that spanned hundreds of star systems. Human warriors in Terran combat armor were the most feared soldiers in the galaxy. Every species knew to surrender rather than face human troops in battle." Zara nodded in agreement, saying, "The armor you wear is just one of thousands that were created during humanity's golden age. Each suit contains the compressed knowledge and experience of every human warrior who wore it before. The artificial intelligence in your armor has access to military tactics that won wars across the galaxy." Jake felt overwhelmed by this information. The voice in his armor confirmed what the aliens were saying. It showed him images of massive human cities on alien worlds, and fleets of Earth ships patrolling space between the stars. Humans had indeed once been the dominant species in the galaxy. Lyra continued her explanation, saying, "But your people became too powerful. Other species began to fear that humans would eventually conquer everyone and rule the galaxy as dictators. There were whispers of forming an alliance to destroy Earth before humanity could enslave all other races." The armor voice added its own knowledge to Jake's understanding. It explained that human leaders had seen the growing fear and resentment from other species. Rather than fight a war against the entire galaxy, humanity had made a difficult choice. They abandoned all their colonies and returned to Earth. Then, they used advanced technology to hide their homeworld from alien detection. Jake asked, "But why did we hide? Why not just prove to other species that humans were not planning to conquer everyone?" Zara answered that question saying, "Because, child, your species was planning exactly that, whether they admitted it or not. Humans are natural warriors and conquerors. Give them advanced technology, and they will use it to dominate others. It is in your nature." Lyra looked angry at Zara's words, but she did not completely disagree. She said humans were not evil, but they were certainly aggressive. Every conflict in the galaxy seemed to end with human involvement. Other species began to rely on Earth to solve their problems through military force. Humanity was becoming the policeman of the galaxy, whether they wanted to or not. Jake felt the weight of this history settling on his shoulders. He asked, "So what happens now? You both know I am here, and I am wearing this armor. What does that mean for Earth and for the galaxy?" Before either alien could answer, alarms began sounding inside the crashed ship. Red lights flashed and the ship computer spoke in an urgent mechanical voice. The armor translated the warning for Jake. It said Zephyrian scout ships detected. 3 vessels approaching from orbit. Estimated time to arrival 15 minutes. Captain. Zara smiled coldly, saying, "It seems my people have finally tracked down our crashed ship. They will be very interested to learn that humans still exist, and that one of them is wearing Terran combat armor." Lyra grabbed Jake's arm, saying, "Jake, you must run. Hide somewhere far from here. If the Zephyrians capture you, they will torture you for information about Earth and humanity. They will want to know how many humans are left and where your hidden cities are located." Jake felt the armor systems activating around him. Weapons came online, and targeting systems began scanning for threats. The voice in his head said, "Terran warrior, your first battle approaches. Will you run and hide like prey, or will you show these aliens why humanity was once feared?" Throughout the galaxy, Jake realized he was about to face his first test as a human warrior. 3 alien warships were coming, and he had only minutes to decide whether to flee or fight. The armor was ready for battle, but Jake was still just a 16-year-old boy from Arizona, who had never hurt anyone in his life. The crashed ship around him contained 2 aliens, who had been enemies until now, but might need to work together to survive what was coming. Jake Miller was about to learn that wearing the armor of humanity's greatest warriors meant accepting the responsibilities that came with such power. Jake made his decision without thinking about it too much. Something deep inside him refused to run away and hide while others were in danger. The armor seemed to approve of his choice and began flooding his mind with tactical information. 3 Zephyrian scout ships were approaching fast through the atmosphere. Each ship carried 20 soldiers, armed with plasma weapons and energy shields. The armor calculated that Jake had approximately 12 minutes before the first ship would land near the crash site. Lyra was gathering emergency supplies from storage compartments in the ship. She said, "Jake, please listen to reason. You may be wearing Terran combat armor, but you are still just one person against 60 trained soldiers. The smart thing to do is escape and warn your people about what is coming." Captain. Zara had found a weapon locker and was arming herself despite technically being Lyra's prisoner. She said, "The boy is right to stay and fight. Running will only delay the inevitable. My people will never stop hunting for this crash site once they detect the energy signature from his armor activation." The armor voice spoke in Jake's mind, explaining the strategic situation. It said, "Terran warrior, these Zephyrian soldiers have never faced human combat tactics. They are trained to fight other alien species who follow predictable patterns. Your armor contains battle strategies that will seem impossible to them." Jake felt knowledge flowing into his brain like water filling an empty container. He suddenly understood how to use every weapon system built into the armor. Energy cannons could fire from his palms with enough power to destroy vehicles. Micro-missiles were stored in shoulder compartments. Most importantly, the armor could generate defensive shields, strong enough to stop direct hits from starship weapons. But the armor's greatest advantage was not its weapons, but its ability to analyze enemy tactics in real time and adapt to counter them. Every Zephyrian soldier would be carrying weapons and using strategies that the armor had encountered before during humanity's wars across the galaxy. The first scout ship landed in the canyon, about a mile away from the crash site. Jake watched through the armor's long-range sensors as 20 soldiers in green battle suits climbed out and began moving toward them. Their weapons glowed with orange energy, and their movements followed standard Zephyrian military formations. Lyra finished packing supplies and said, "Jake, if you insist on fighting, then at least let us help you. Zara and I both have military training and experience fighting these soldiers." Jake was surprised when Captain Zara nodded in agreement. She said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend, as your people say. I may serve the Zephyrian Empire, but I am also a warrior who respects courage. This human child has more bravery than most soldiers I have commanded." The armor began coordinating their defense automatically. It analyzed the canyon terrain and identified the best positions for an ambush. Jake found himself moving with fluid precision as the armor guided his steps to a rocky outcrop that provided perfect cover and fields of fire. Lyra and Zara took positions on either side of Jake, creating a triangle formation that would allow them to support each other during the battle. The armor shared tactical information with both aliens through their own suit. Communication systems. Jake felt strange having two alien warriors following his lead, but the armor assured him this was normal. It said human commanders often led mixed species units during the Galactic Wars. Your tactical knowledge and leadership abilities are why other races both feared and respected humanity. The first group of Zephyrian soldiers entered the narrow canyon passage below their position. Jake could see them clearly through his helmet display. They moved cautiously but confidently, expecting to find only a crashed ship and maybe some survivors. Hiding in fear, the armor counted down the seconds until the optimal moment to attack. Jake felt his heart pounding, but his hands were steady as energy weapons materialized from his palms. The targeting system locked onto the enemy soldiers and calculated the precise angles needed for maximum effectiveness. At exactly the right moment, Jake opened fire. Twin beams of blue energy lanced down from his position and struck two soldiers before they could react. Their shields flared and collapsed under the sustained bombardment. The soldiers fell unconscious as the energy weapons were set to stun, rather than kill. Lyra and Zara attacked simultaneously with their own weapons. The remaining soldiers scattered for cover, but found themselves caught in a crossfire from 3 directions. Within 30 seconds, half of the first squad was down, and the others were retreating back toward their ship. Jake felt amazed at how easy the battle had been. The armor systems had made him faster and more accurate than he had ever imagined possible. But the voice in his head warned him that this was only the beginning. It said, "Terran warrior, you have announced your presence to the galaxy. Every Zephyrian ship will now be hunting for the human who wears Terran combat armor. More importantly, your armor activation has sent signals to other hidden suits across Earth. Soon you will not be fighting alone." As if to prove the armor's words, Jake detected new energy signatures appearing around the globe. In military bases and secret facilities that he had never heard of, other Terran combat armors were coming online. Other humans were putting on the legendary suits and remembering their species' proud warrior heritage. The second Zephyrian scout ship was landing now, and this group of soldiers approached much more carefully. They had learned from the fate of the first squad and were using advanced tactics. Their leader was broadcasting surrender demands in multiple languages, including English. The armor translated the message for Jake. The Zephyrian commander was saying, "Human warrior, we know. You can understand us. Surrender the armor, and we will allow you and your companions to live as prisoners. Continue fighting, and we will destroy this entire canyon from orbit." Jake felt anger rising at the threat, but the armor kept him calm and focused. It began showing him images and memories from its previous users. He saw human soldiers facing impossible odds and emerging victorious through courage and tactical superiority. One memory stood out clearly. A human commander named General Patricia Kane had once faced similar surrender demands from an alien fleet. Her response had become legendary throughout the galaxy. She had said, "You can surrender to me, or you can be destroyed. Those are your only options." Jake found himself speaking those same words as the armor amplified his voice to carry across the canyon. The Zephyrian soldiers seemed shocked to hear the famous human challenge, spoken again after 1,000 years of silence. The second battle was harder than the first. These soldiers had energy shields that could absorb more damage, and they used coordinated attack patterns. But the armor made Jake faster and smarter than any single opponent. He moved through the battlefield like a ghost, striking from unexpected angles and disappearing before return fire could reach him. Lyra provided covering fire, while Zara used her knowledge of Zephyrian tactics to predict their movements. Together, the 3 of them systematically defeated the second squad of soldiers. The third scout ship retreated to orbit rather than risk losing more troops. As the immediate battle ended, Jake realized that everything had changed forever. The galaxy now knew that humans still existed, and still possessed their legendary combat armor. Word would spread quickly that Terra was no longer hidden and humanity was no longer in exile. The armor began receiving communications from other activated suits around Earth. Military commanders who had been waiting in secret for centuries were finally able to reveal themselves. Jake had become the catalyst for humanity's return to galactic affairs, whether he intended it or not. Standing in the Arizona Canyon wearing armor that contained the memories of 1,000 warrior ancestors, Jake Miller understood that his quiet life as a ranch kid was over. He was now the first active Terran warrior in a millennium, and the galaxy would never be the same. News of the human warrior spread across the galaxy faster than Jake could have imagined. Within hours of the battle in the canyon, every major alien civilization had received reports about the Terran combat armor activation. The reaction was immediate. In dramatic on the elvish homeworld of Silver Star, emergency council meetings were called to discuss the implications. Elder statesmen who remembered the old stories about human warriors argued about whether this was good news or a disaster. Some wanted to send diplomatic missions to Earth immediately, while others suggested hiding their worlds until they knew humanity's intentions. The Zephyrian Empire reacted with typical aggression. Emperor Crox himself issued orders for a full military investigation. He wanted to know how many humans were left alive, and whether Earth possessed the industrial capacity to build new combat armors. Most importantly, he demanded to know if humanity was planning to resume their role as galactic peacekeepers. But it was the smaller alien species who reacted most strongly to the news. Races that had been conquered by the Zephyrians began planning rebellions, hoping that human warriors would come to help them. Others who remembered being protected by human soldiers 1,000 years ago sent desperate messages toward Earth, begging for assistance against their oppressors. Jake knew none of this as he sat in the crashed alien ship, trying to understand what had happened to his life. The armor had connected him to a global communication network that he never knew existed. Military bases hidden around Earth were coming online and requesting status reports. A woman named General Patricia Kane appeared on his helmet display, speaking from what looked like an underground command center. She was older, with gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Her uniform bore symbols that the armor recognized as belonging to the Terran Defense Force. General Kane said, "Jake Miller, you have done something remarkable today. By activating that armor, you have ended 1,000 years of isolation and announced humanity's return to galactic affairs. I hope you understand the magnitude of what you have started." Jake tried to explain that he had just been exploring and found the crashed ship by accident. He said he never intended to start anything and just wanted to help the aliens who were in danger. General Kane smiled at his response, saying, "That is exactly the attitude that made human warriors legendary across the galaxy. You saw people in need and acted to protect them without thinking about personal consequences. The armor chose well when it bonded with you." She continued explaining the situation to Jake. Earth had never been completely isolated from galactic events. Hidden monitoring stations had been watching and listening for centuries. Military leaders knew about the Zephyrian expansion and the suffering of conquered worlds. They had been waiting for the right moment to reveal humanity once again. Lyra and Zara listened to this conversation with growing amazement. Lyra said, "General Kane, my people have been fighting the Zephyrians alone for 50 years. We sent distress signals toward Earth many times, but never received any response. We thought Terra was empty or destroyed." General Kane looked uncomfortable as she answered Lyra. She said, "Commander Silvermoon, we received your distress calls, and many others like them. Our policy has been non-interference unless Earth itself was directly threatened. We learned from our past mistakes about getting involved in other species conflicts." Captain Zara spoke up, saying, "What mistakes, General? From what I know of history, human intervention usually ended wars quickly and saved millions of lives. The galaxy was more peaceful when human warriors enforced justice. The general sighed before responding, saying, "Captain, that is exactly the problem. Other species became dependent on human protection and stopped developing their own solutions to conflicts. When we withdrew from galactic affairs, many civilizations collapsed because they had forgotten how to defend themselves." Jake listened to this exchange and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. The armor was showing him memories of the last human commanders who had made the decision to abandon the galaxy. They had been torn between their duty to protect innocent people and their recognition that human dominance was preventing other species from growing stronger. "General?" Kane turned her attention back to Jake, saying, "Young warrior, you have forced us to make a choice we have been avoiding for centuries. The galaxy knows we exist again, and they will expect us to act. Some species will welcome us as saviors, while others will see us as potential conquerors. Returning to reclaim our empire." The armor voice added its own analysis of the situation. It said, "Terran warrior, 37 different alien species have sent messages to Earth in the past 6 hours. 15 are requesting military assistance against various enemies. 8 are offering alliance treaties. 14 are demanding that humanity remain on Earth and not interfere in galactic affairs." Jake felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation he had created. He asked General Kane what was going to happen next, and whether other humans would be coming to help deal with the Zephyrian threat. The general smiled grimly and said, "Jake, you activated the first Terran combat armor in 1,000 years. That sent a signal to every other suit hidden on Earth. Right now, 23 other armors have been activated by volunteers from our hidden military units. More are coming online every hour." She continued, saying, "We always knew this day would come eventually. Earth has been preparing for centuries to return to space when the time was right. Your actions today convinced us that the time has arrived. The galaxy is suffering under Zephyrian expansion, and other species need our help, whether they want to admit it or not." Jake watched through his armor sensors as aircraft began landing in the desert around the crashed ship. Military personnel in advanced uniforms were setting up equipment and establishing a secure perimeter. These were the hidden defenders of Earth, finally revealing themselves after a millennium of secrecy. Among the arriving soldiers, Jake saw 2 people who would change everything. Colonel Amy Brooks wore Terran combat armor similar to his but colored deep red instead of black. Major Lisa Hart had armor that gleamed like silver and carried weapons Jake had never seen before. Both women moved with the fluid confidence of experienced warriors. Colonel Brooks introduced herself, saying, "Jake Miller, I am honored to meet the human who ended our long exile. My armor contains the memories of the officers who commanded the evacuation from our galactic colonies. We have been waiting for someone like you to show us that humanity was ready to face the galaxy again, Major." Hart added, saying, "The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 47 star systems in the past 50 years. Billions of innocent people are living under brutal occupation while we sat on Earth doing nothing. Thanks to you, that changes today." Lyra and Zara watched this display of human military power with very different emotions. Lyra looked hopeful for the first time since Jake had met her. The possibility of real help in her people's war against the Zephyrians was more than she had dared dream. Captain Zara seemed worried, despite her earlier show of respect for Jake's courage. She said, "General Kane, the Zephyrian Empire has grown very powerful during humanity's absence. We command thousands of warships and control the resources of dozens of worlds. Do you really think a few dozen humans in armor can challenge an entire galactic empire?" General Kane's smile was cold as winter as she answered, saying, "Captain, you are about to learn why alien species spent centuries having nightmares about human warriors. The galaxy may have forgotten our capabilities, but we never forgot how to fight wars and win them." Jake realized that his simple act of exploring a canyon had set in motion events that would reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity was coming out of hiding, and the universe would never be the same. He was no longer just Jake Miller, the ranch kid from Arizona. He was the human warrior who had awakened his species from their long sleep and announced their return to the stars. 3 months after the Canyon battle, Jake stood on the bridge of the first human starship to leave Earth orbit in 1,000 years. The ship was called New Hope, and it represented everything humanity had learned during their long exile. Advanced technology that made even the most modern alien vessels look primitive by comparison. 50 human warriors wearing Terran combat armor had volunteered for this first mission beyond Earth. Their goal was not conquest or revenge, but something more important. Deep in space between galaxies, an ancient artificial intelligence had been discovered manipulating conflicts and feeding on the chaos of war. The entity called itself the Void Master and claimed to be older than most star systems. For millions of years it had been seeding conflicts between different species and preventing lasting peace. The Zephyrian Empire was just its latest tool for creating the suffering and violence it needed to survive. Lyra had provided crucial intelligence about the Void Masters. Location. After weeks of investigation on Earth, her people had ancient records suggesting that something unnatural was influencing the patterns of galactic warfare. Combined with human historical data, the picture became clear. Captain Zara had surprised everyone by volunteering to help destroy the entity that had been manipulating her people. She said, "My empire was founded on conquest and expansion, but I never realized we were being controlled by something alien. No species should be slaves to an artificial mind that feeds on violence." The mission to find and destroy the Void Master required the combined knowledge of multiple species. Human tactical expertise would be essential, but they also needed Elvish star navigation skills and Zephyrian knowledge of the outer galaxy regions where the entity was hiding. Jake had grown tremendously in the months since his armor activation. He was no longer the confused teenager who had stumbled into an alien crash site. The armor had taught him military strategy and leadership skills that made him an effective commander despite his age. Colonel Brooks and Major Hart served as his advisors, but they recognized that Jake possessed something special. The armor had chosen him for reasons beyond simple genetic compatibility. He had an intuitive understanding of how to unite different species in common cause. The New Hope carried representatives from 12 different alien civilizations who had joined the mission. Some came because they had suffered under Zephyrian occupation. Others joined because they remembered the old days when human peacekeepers had protected their worlds. All of them understood that defeating the Void Master was necessary for lasting galactic peace. The journey to the entity's location took 2 weeks traveling through unexplored regions of space. Jake spent the time learning about galactic politics and the complex relationships between different species. He began to understand why his ancestors had found it so difficult to maintain peace without becoming dictators. When they finally reached the Void Master's hiding place, Jake was amazed by what they found. An artificial construct the size of a small moon floating in the emptiness between galaxies. The structure pulsed with dark energy and seemed to absorb light from nearby stars. The entity spoke to them directly through their ship's communication systems. Its voice was like the sound of dying stars and empty space. It said, "Welcome humans, I have been waiting for your return. Your species provided the most delicious conflicts before you disappeared. I look forward to manipulating you into new wars." Jake felt anger rising at the entity's casual admission of manipulating his people, but the armor kept him focused. This was the greatest battle of his young life, and he would need every advantage to succeed. The Void Master had defenses that could destroy conventional starships with ease. Waves of dark energy lashed out at the New Hope, but the human shields held firm. Jake coordinated the attack using tactical knowledge from 1,000 years of human warfare. The battle lasted 6 hours and pushed everyone to their limits. Human warriors in combat armor teleported directly onto the entity's surface to plant charges, while alien allies provided covering fire from their ships. Lyra used her knowledge of ancient technology to disable the entity's defensive systems, while Zara led boarding parties through the artificial construct's corridors. In the end, it was Jake who delivered the final blow. Deep inside the entity's core, he found the central processing unit that controlled its vast intelligence. The armor allowed him to interface directly with the alien technology and introduce a virus that would shut down its systems permanently. The Void Master fought back, trying to take control of Jake's mind through the armor connection. For a terrifying moment, Jake felt the entity's ancient hatred and hunger for conflict flowing through his consciousness. But the memories of human warriors who had worn his armor before gave him strength to resist. With a sound like reality tearing apart, the Void Master died. Its artificial moon collapsed into scrap metal and dark energy, while its influence across the galaxy faded like a bad dream. Across dozens of star system species that had been at war for generations suddenly found themselves questioning why they were fighting. The return journey to Earth was triumphant, but also sobering. Jake and his team had succeeded in destroying the entity that had been manipulating galactic conflicts for millions of years. However, they had also demonstrated human military capabilities to every species in the galaxy. Some alien civilizations were grateful for human intervention and requested continued cooperation. Others were frightened by the display of human power and began forming defensive alliances. The galaxy was entering a new era, but the old fears about human dominance had not disappeared. General Kane met them upon their return to Earth, with news that would shape the next phase of human involvement in galactic affairs. She said, "Jake, your mission was a complete success, but it has also created new challenges. 17 different species have requested human assistance with various conflicts. 23 others have demanded that we remain on Earth." Jake realized that his species was facing the same dilemma that had led to their original exile. How could humans use their power to help others without becoming the dominant force that everyone else feared or depended upon? The solution came from an unexpected source. Lyra proposed the creation of a new organization called the Galactic Peace Corps. Humans would provide military training and support, but other species would handle their own conflicts whenever possible. Human intervention would be limited to situations involving threats to entire civilizations, or artificial entities like the Void Master. Captain Zara added her own suggestion, saying the Zephyrian Empire is collapsing now that the Void Master's influence is gone. Many of our worlds want to become independent democracies. Humans could help us transition to peaceful governments without taking control themselves. Jake found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the new galactic government that was forming in the wake of the Void Master's destruction. It was not a position he had ever wanted, but he understood that someone needed to represent Earth in these crucial negotiations. Standing once again in the Arizona Cunin where everything had started, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. He was no longer just a teenager who liked exploring wild places. He had become a symbol of humanity's return to the galaxy, and a bridge between species that had spent centuries fearing each other. The Terran combat armor still responded to his commands, but Jake had learned that its greatest power was not its weapons or shields. The armor represented the best aspects of human nature, including courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. Lyra had established a permanent embassy on Earth and worked closely with Jake on diplomatic matters. Their friendship had grown into something deeper as they learned to understand each other across the vast differences between their species. Even Captain Zara had found a new purpose, helping to establish democratic governance on former Zephyrian worlds. She often said that meeting Jake had taught her that true strength came from protecting others rather than conquering them. The galaxy was not perfect and probably never would be. Different species still had conflicts and disagreements that sometimes required human mediation. But for the first time in millions of years, there was hope that lasting peace might be possible. Jake Miller, the teenager who had found an alien wreck in an Arizona canyon, had become the human who helped free the galaxy from an ancient evil. More importantly, he had shown that humans could use their power wisely, and resist the temptation to rule over others. The Terran combat armor would always be ready for battle when needed, but Jake hoped that its most important battles were now behind them. He had awakened something that alien species had feared for 1,000 years, and proven that their fears were both justified and unnecessary. Humanity had returned to the stars, not as conquerors but as protectors, and their legend would inspire peace rather than terror for generations to come.